I would like to introduce to you one of the most successful formula of our last year ABSL summit. Oxford debates always heat up its participants and divide the audience. We hope it will resonate also today.
Business in disruptive times calls for disruptive leader. Or don't we have enough disruption and we should look for the peaceful leader that will calm down the situation and lead us through the rough seas of crisis with as few changes as possible. Which profile will win?
To moderate our Oxford debate at this year's ABSL Digital Forum, we have invited Wawrzyniec Smoczyński, the creator of Polityka Insight, an unforgettable partner in discussion with Simon Sinek at the ABSL conference in 2018 in Poznań. Wawrzyniec, good to have you back with us.
And sorry for the slight delay. You probably understand that it's difficult to say no to yet another statement from Mrs. Emilewicz, but we like her for that.
Yes, I'm very much acquainted with moderating debates with ministers, so I fully understand the position in which you were. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Can we move on to the debate now?
Yes, please, continue.
Right. Well, thank you very much to all of you for participating and staying along to the session that comes online right now. As Paweł has announced, we are doing a proper Oxford debate here in Poland at the ABSL Digital Forum, and I'm really thrilled to be the moderator today. My role is here to be an impartial moderator and a ruthless timekeeper, so I will try to make this event as opposing, as interesting, and intellectually challenging as possible. But we also really want to hear from our panelists and let them speak in favor and against the proposition. As Paweł has introduced, the proposition is as follows: business in disruptive times calls for disruptive leadership. We definitely do have disruptive times these days, and everybody who leads an organization, whether it's a big company, a small corporate institution, a ministry like Mrs. Emilewicz does, or an NGO, is asking herself or himself, should I be disruptive in these times, or should I be more adaptive? Should we as CEOs rock the boat even further, or make sure nobody goes overboard? Should we look for new opportunities, or stick to our core businesses? Before I present the participants in today's debate, whom you already have seen briefly on the screen, I wanted to ask all the people who are listening to our debate today, all the audience, to take a vote before we start. In the bottom part of your screen, you have two small buttons where you can vote whether you agree with the statement. Business in disruptive times calls for disruptive leadership. If you disagree with that statement, please use the other button. In a few minutes before we start the discussion, I will give you the initial results of the vote before you hear the arguments in favor and against. In order to participate in today's debate, we have aligned a brilliant set of speakers for the thesis, for the proposition in favor of disruptive leadership. We'll hear from Sławomir Sikora, the CEO of Citi Handlowy, and Beata Stelmach, the president of PZL-Świdnik and SVP Leonardo Helicopters Poland. Please welcome Sławomir and Beata. You can't clap your hands as you usually would in a conference room, but we are really happy to have you here.
Good afternoon.
Against the motion.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Beata, and good afternoon to you, Sławek. Against the motion, we'll hear from Gregoire Nitot, the founder and CEO of CE Poland, and Anna Jakubowski, the general manager of Avon Cosmetics Poland. Anna and Gregoire, it's really great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Great. As I said, my role here will be limited. I will try to make us stick to the order of the day. And the order of the day is as follows. We'll have 3 rounds of discussion. In the first round, both parties against the motion will present their cases. Round now, each will be opposing camp, an intrusive question, trying to undermine their argument. And in the third round, both camps will present their closing arguments. Before we start, let me give you the initial results of the vote of the audience. So 57.7% of participants who have participated in the poll are against the motion, disagree with the thesis Business in Disruptive Times call for disruptive leadership. But 42.3% are actually in favor of the motion. This is the outset, the situation which we have before we start the debate. And I now would like to formally open the first round and invite Beata Stelmach to present her argument in favor of the proposition Business in Disruptive Times calls for disruptive leadership. Beata, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear members of the opposition team, we would not have been in the 21st century as we know the world if the disruptive leaders had not appeared on our globe before. Disruptive leadership is nothing more than creating the future. And let me bring only a few arguments to convince in particular those who voted against this statement. So first, disruption means just visionary leadership. History will always remember, remember us as those who create, who shape the environment. Any ambitious leader wants to lay the ground for the future. But every ambitious leader wants to be a creator, not only a low risk and at low cost follower. Those who wanted to survive only on the market missed opportunities and just fell out of the market. Let me quote Henry Ford, dear members of the opposition team. You know Henry Ford. You know what he said? He said, if at the beginning of my career as an entrepreneur, I asked clients what they wanted, everyone would agree we want faster horses. That's why he took disruptive decisions. Dear members of the opposition team, I believe you will agree that a first mover advantage gets the company who gains a competitive advantage by being the first on the market, bringing as the first new products or services to the market. By such moves, you are able to establish strong brand recognition and customer loyalty. You just build your relationships with your customers. At the same time, you gain time to develop economies of scale, just cost-efficient way of producing or delivering your products or services. You know, Jeff Bezos understood that usage of internet in early 90s was growing at approximately 2,000% per year. That's why he changed his business model by disruptive decision. He moved his bookstore to internet. Now Amazon is at the top of global players. Last but not least, disruption is nothing like to capitalize on a momentum. The world is changing so fast. And to keep up, you have to anticipate and make bold and brave decisions, disruptive decisions. You will not be able to you will not be offered the second chance, and your competition will easily take over part of your market. Thomas Edison, without whom we wouldn't be able to fly on the moon, we wouldn't be able to light our room, we wouldn't be able to generate power. He said, restlessness is discontent, and discontent is the first necessity of progress. But look around. Mark Zuckerberg, he says, when the world changes quickly, people have new needs, and that means there are more things to build. In times of economic downturn, the right thing to do is keep investing in building the future. Look, if not such visionaries, we wouldn't be able to run our discussion virtually. But we are real. Our discussion is in a virtual space, but our arguments are real. The world has been waiting for disruptive leaders. The world is looking for disruptive leadership. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Beata, thank you very much for your initial argument in favor of the proposition and for keeping the time. Now we turn to the opposition camp, to the opposition team, and I warmly welcome again to the stage Gregoire Nitot, who will present the case against the proposition Business in Disruptive Times Call for Disruptive Leadership. Gregoire, the floor is yours. 5 minutes again.
Okay, hello everybody. So I'm against this proposition. I think the disruptive leader is kind of a bullshit marketing word. So of course, there are some disruptive businesses, and it's not since today, it's since hundreds of years, like the business connected with horses was disrupt when a trend appears in the 19th century. Toyota disrupt General Motors and all the American companies in the 60s, 70s with lower production costs. An interesting example in Poland of disruption. I arrived, I'm a French guy, I live in Poland since 2006. And in 2006, when we recruited people, we used, I remember, Gazeta Wyborcza, a Monday publication, to publish some job ads on a written published press. After it's moved to online advertisement, job pilot, and mainly Pracuj, pracuj.pl. Now we can wonder if Pracuj won't be disrupted by LinkedIn. So there are some changes, some evolutions, and there are many examples. But when we are analyzing the word disruption and the definition of disruption, a disruptive leader, I tried to find out on Google, and I read the word like disruptive leader causes trouble, discomfort, anxiety. A disruptive leader divides or separates people, separates teams. A disruptive leader is aggressive or violent. So I think today, during this COVID time, we don't need such kinds of people or disruptive who will put more aggression and more trouble into those tough times. We need calm leaders, sure of themselves, who are, of course, ready for changes, ready for innovation, who challenge the status quo. We need simply good bosses, good managers, who are inspiring the team, who are able to put pressure when needed, who are able to take tough decisions, but not necessarily disruptive leader. So I will give the voice, I think, to Sławek now to check if he follow my thought or not at all, and perhaps he will manage to convince me. So I give back the voice to our chairman.
Consciously resign from using your remaining 2 minutes, opening yourself to the question coming from the other camp. This is a tactic some participants in Oxford debates use. I just wanted to double check whether you're conscious that you still have time. Okay, so now we are turning into to round 2, where each camp will have the opportunity to ask the other camp an intrusive question, trying to undermine what the other camp said. And here we turn to Sławomir Sikora, who will ask a question to the opposition.
Sure. Thank you, Greg, for your very straightforward summary of the disruptive leadership. However, similarly to your examples, when you went back to the 17th and 18th and 19th century, I think that definition which you've read in Google is exactly reflecting those times. But let's face it, we are in Europe, we are in European Union, we are governed by the labor law, we have a partnership relationship with employees, and we are representing the European dream. So I think with that framework, I think it's fair to change the definition of the disruptive leader. And while I would acknowledge what's been said at the beginning, that humans like to live in the status quo. None of us like to change. There are lectures at many universities which train students how to embrace the change, because change is not natural to humans. However, I believe that people want the progress. People want the change. People want to benefit from the progress. If you look at the products, we chase the new products and we want the new products to push out the old one from the market. The same token, when you have employees, employees look for the bosses who inspire them. Employees look for bosses who have a vision. And this is even more true at the time of the crisis. Whether it's an economic crisis, whether it's a pandemic crisis, doesn't matter. We are in the crisis. So if anybody in the audience would ask yourself, who would you like at the steer of the company, of the company you work for, who would you choose? I leave that as an open question. And the question to the opposition is as follows. How, with the status quo arguments, how do you attract the best talent to survive in the competitive environment? How do you attract the best people to create a winning team so that your company will not go out of business because the competitors will eat your lunch? That's my question.
Anna Jakubowski. Anna, the floor is yours now.
Super, thank you. Pleasure to be here. The argument was put forth that we look for change, we look for progress. Absolutely, and in that context, if you look at organizations that are successful over centuries, they are companies that evolve. So nobody has anything to say about progress and change. It's about how you evolve. And if you look at organizations that are formed on purpose, those organizations don't need to disrupt themselves. They evolve because they are continually changing and meeting ultimately the needs of their customers first and foremost. So this idea that disruption is needed for success, I believe is questionable. The most important role that we have as leaders is to be the stewards of our organizations, the stewards of purpose. And so when you come back and ask the question, what is it going to take to attract talent? What people will be attracted to are organizations that have a strong sense of purpose, organizations that are purpose-led in the sense that they give meaning and value, and employees that can understand and associate with that are going to be far more loyal than to the gadgets and or the salaries and what have you. We all know that ultimately loyalty is built through, yes, having some hygienic factors in place, but ultimately it's our sense of ability to associate with where we are. So first and foremost, talent will go to where they feel they are best valued, associated, and where they fit culturally in terms of sense of purpose. And you don't need to be disruptive to be able to then show that. I think this concept of disruptiveness has come from, if I go back to the early references of trailblazing has always been here. Whether it was Henry Ford trailblazing or whether it's Mark Zuckerberg, trailblazers have always existed. This idea of disruptiveness becoming sexy really has sort of come from this last sort of decade or so with this the startup world and this sort of idea of wanting to be disruptive, building from the old Clayton Christensen theories of disruptive innovation, of creating different business models that would undercut the incumbent. All of a sudden, the startup world, it has been ultimately founded on this idea of being disruptive. But the challenge is that that disruptiveness creates ultimately in the end instability. And ultimately, what investors are looking for is the wildness and the aggressiveness in the idea, and not necessarily always the sustainability in the idea. There is not necessarily a strong moral compass with how investors look at where and which business ideas that they will evolve to. The idea of talent, you mentioned talent staying. If you take a look at the top unicorn company, billion-dollar companies today, and if you take a look at their turnover ratio of employees within the first year, they have a 25% turnover ratio of employees in the first year. Whereas if you look at from LinkedIn statistics, the average turnover ratio of companies in the first year, it's 11%. So these highly disruptive, sexy, innovative companies don't seem to be able to keep their talent perhaps as effectively as companies that are stable, have strong visions, have a deep sense of purpose, and our ability to engage their organization through evolving and meeting customer needs, which is ultimately what Amazon did. Amazon's success isn't based on anything other than they've been following the customer every millimeter and meeting the customer's needs. That's what's driven their success. Not the fact that they hinge themselves on being a disruptive company. They hinge themselves on being a customer-centric company. And therefore, that sense of purpose, that sense of passion of wanting to serve the customer is what has led to their success. So talent will go to where purpose is most meaningful for them. Sure, the gadgets and the salaries and the sexiness at the beginning may have some shine, but ultimately, in the end, what we're looking at is sustainability, the sense of connectivity, and the sense of wanting to know that you've made a difference in this world. To also use a quote, Mark Twain quoted, "The two most important days of your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why." Again, the two most important days of your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. So ultimately, what drives us isn't this idea of progress. What drives us is this idea of purpose.
We are actually now right in the middle of our debate, our Oxford debate. I cannot gauge the sentiment of the audience because we are online, so I cannot see the room where people are watching and listening to us. But I can definitely say that our participants are up to the task. We had a rough question and we have had a very good answer from the opposing camp. So we are now turning to Gregoire, and I wanted Gregoire now to ask a question which would undermine the case of the proposition. Gregoire, you have 5 minutes to ask the question, and the person who will answer your question will be Beata, who will have another 5 minutes to handle that problem.
So, before asking a question to Beata, we'll answer Sławek about the recruited, talented people. I think it's a key aspect of every manager to be able to recruit, attract great talent. it's my everyday job. In SII, we recruit 1,600 people a year. So we are fighting for recruitment every day to find the best talents on the market. So we have 4,700 people in Poland in 14 Polish cities. So I acquired 3 months ago a football club, Polonia Warszawa, and it's a key focus for me today to reinforce this team from August, to be able to build a strong team, recruit good players, to be able to fight and to try to grow into a higher division. I even worked on that today. I attract good players. So I think we don't have to be disruptive. We have to be imaginative. We have to be evolutive. So, for example, to attract good players, I mentioned my sport director, PR department, trainer. Today, it would be good to create a movie. And even I launched somebody to the training today to shoot the training, to make interviews of players. Why it's so exciting and good to join Polonia Warszawa Football Club. In SII, you see, to be good. So, Sławek question, to attract people, it's dozens of small details, from office building, for the talk you have with the candidate, above all to check his spirit, his ambition, what he's looking for, and he fits the job position you have open. We could talk about that during hours. But so the good leader must be able to attract great talents. 100% agree. But it doesn't have, or she doesn't have, to be disruptive. Again, disruptive, I repeat the definition of disruptive. It's somebody who causes trouble, discomfort, anxiety, who is aggressive or violent in nature. We need people, of course, decisive, who are not afraid of changes, who innovate constantly, who analyze competition. Sławek mentioned the competitors, they are all around, to listen to the customer and to be able to change ourselves, to listen to critics, to analyze our weaknesses. We must do that every day. But now my question to Beata. Beata, are you a disruptive leader? So are you an aggressive person, violent in nature, who create constant stress among your subordinates? Are you a troublemaker, Beata?
Well, that's a question.
To shortly answer, the answer is no. I am not a troublemaker. I am, in contrary, responsible leader who takes the responsibility for even brave, even disruptive decisions. And there are many more examples, and not only concentrating on my own experience, but those who went to such a moment of the business trouble of the company. Some of the companies, let me recall, Apple was an example when in the late 90s, the company went almost bankrupt. So you may say, oh, let's not make a trouble. Let's calm the situation. Just let's give up. But those who decided not to give up introduced to the market first iPod music store, then iPad, then iPhone App Store, and many, many more. Apple today is again top 5 companies in the globe. They didn't give up, but they took brave, disruptive decisions. The same happened to IBM when in 90s the company reoriented their business model from hardware producer into the software and service provider. Look, dear members of the opposition team, you said that the company should follow the expectations of your customers. And exactly, IBM followed the expectations of their customers because the customers expected service, expected solutions, expected advice. And this is exactly what IBM is today. Would you call those leaders adoptive leaders, or those who were not afraid of taking disruptive decisions? You say that you prefer attracting people and offering them a stable environment, business environment. That's right. But how would you explain to them that they do not participate in creating the future? How would you explain your people, your good, brave talents that you attracted, that they will just follow what the others may invent to the market? How would you explain your partners that you just follow because you prefer to stay calm, quiet? Why? Why not to be disruptive? Taking the responsibility and taking smart disruptive decisions. Revolution does not mean that you destroy. Revolution sometimes means that you improve. You are hungry for change. And if you change the world, you are just a creator of the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, the opposition team.
Thank you, Beata. I have practically no work to do here in this debate because everybody is so disciplined. You even don't use your full time. But you're making each and every one of you, really concise and to the point arguments, which is great to listen to. I wanted now to turn all of us to round three, where both camps will present their closing arguments, trying to wrap up what has been presented before and come up with arguments which haven't been yet presented. You will now get out your silver bullets in this debate. So first goes the opposition. Anna Jakubowski will present the closing argument against the motion Business in Disruptive Times calls for disruptive leadership. Anna, the floor is yours.
Indeed, we are living in extraordinarily unique times, extraordinarily uncomfortable times, often referred to as VUCA, the volatile and uncertain, complex, ambiguous times. And ultimately, this idea of having disruptive leaders who, there's no question, there are traits of disruptive leaders that are valuable, and bringing those traits to the table are absolutely valid. They have a great sense of self-confidence. They have a decisiveness about them. They're confrontational. But in fact, it's in these times, it's in exactly these uncertain times, it's in times that the world is ever more interconnected, ever more interdependent, that we need a leadership style and we need an approach that brings that brings evolution and not necessarily continual disruption. When we look at particular these difficult times, we know that disruptive leadership often doesn't bear well in stress. They become more combative. They become more adversarial. And that's not, we're seeing a lot of negative leadership today in the world, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics, whether it's in the corporate world, or whether it's in the economical or the entrepreneurial world. So ultimately, what this world needs now is absolutely a purpose-led leadership that drives at authenticity, that drives at distributing. If you take a look at when we look at what determines success these days, and we look at how we define success, we often are defining success by people who are multiple millionaires and billionaires that are stripping often the rest of the, there's no balance in terms of how they look at winning at all costs. And so when you look at moving forward, success is based on a style of leadership that drives authenticity, that drives an ability to distribute progress and not hoard progress for themselves. That's what the world is going to need to take the world to the next stage, because what we need now is leadership that's going to bring this world together, rather than continue to create a bigger divide between those that have and those that have not, between those that are politically on this side versus those that are politically on the other side. We need leadership that knows how to bring people together and ultimately bring abundance to all rather than hoard abundance. And ultimately, it's purpose-driven leadership that's going to do that. It's purpose-driven leadership that allows us to identify with a sense of being, both from a professional standpoint as well as a personal standpoint. We have to remember that only 30% of our employees today are truly engaged in our workplace. And so why is that? Why is it that we're not able to get more people bringing them their full selves to the office every day or to their work every day? And it's got to be through a deeper sense of meaning and a deeper sense of purpose to be able to deliver that success and that growth. So disruptive leadership is, I don't think, anything new. Trailblazers have been along for a long time. What disruption or the ability to be successful isn't hinged on disruption. Evolution, understanding customers, is what determines your success, and your ability to bring your organization along with that doesn't require you to create stability and have that sort of sense of leadership where it's more consolidated in terms of power leadership. I think the more self-aware a leader is, the more agile a leader is going to make the better leader in terms of who is able to deal with this complex and volatile world in which we're leading in. It won't be through disruptive leadership. By the way, when we look at 90% of all startups fail. So if those are the disruptors of today, let's keep in mind that 90% of them are left behind because their ideas are not working. Yeah, we need purpose-driven leadership, and that is what is going to give us a better success in our professional and personal lives and bring us to a better world.
Closing argument for the opposition against the motion for disruptive leadership. And we are now turning to the closing argument of the proposition. Sławomir Sikora will present the case in favor of business in disruptive times calls for disruptive leadership. We can't hear you. I think your microphone is switched off.
Yes, I'm back. So thank you. It's been fascinating to listen to our opposition. And I think that if that was true, I think I would have joined the opposition. However, what I've heard is actually a caricature of what the disruptive leadership is, because disruptive leaders are not disrupting people, which you seem to suggest. Disruptive leaders are not disrupting the businesses, the companies. Just the opposite. They create the environment when people feel safe, people feel trusted, people have the sense of purpose. And I think that, moreover, you seem to suggest that disruptive leaders will not address the needs of our customers during the disruptive times. That's, again, a false hypothesis. Let me maybe follow what Greg did at the beginning. Let me read what the internet is telling about the disruptive leaders. Disruptive leader is visionary. Disruptive leader is decisive, involves his team in thinking, looking for a better solution, wants to make an impact on the company and the environment, has the bold vision. I think that's the disruptive leadership which my partner Beata and I are talking about. We talk about disrupting the reality of the market. We are talking about innovation. We are talking about discoveries. We are talking about better way of serving people with products or services. Let me pick example which were used. If I look at Amazon, what Amazon did is Amazon brought the products to our home. Macy's or other big bricks and mortars retailers were not able to meet those needs. So Amazon actually invented the new way of serving the customers. And by the way, Mark Twain, which I like very much to read, and I think it has the good point of saying that why we are born was not the manager, but was a writer. So let's stay in the 20th century. Let's stay where we are today and ask ourselves two questions. What the world will look like if not those leaders who challenge the status quo, who are not happy what they have? Would you like to live in the world where you have the horse-drawn carriages instead of cars? Would you live in the world where the traditional phones doing nothing, just enabling you to call, as opposed to the smartphones where you can write, you can see each other, and by the way, they also deliver on the telephone function? Would you send the traditional postcards, or your kids will send the traditional postcards, or you want the real-time information about what your kids are doing when they are on holidays? I wouldn't like such a world. Would you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sławomir, for the closing argument. I would like now, before we close the debate, to ask the audience to vote again. You have listened to 3 rounds of the Oxford debate on disruptive leadership, to different arguments. Let's vote again and see whether your arguments have shifted as a consequence of what you have heard right now. And as we wait for the results, I wanted to ask a brief question to Beata and to Anna, which was not scheduled in our plan. We have spoken a lot about foreign examples. We are speaking in English, and we are speaking in the language of the Harvard Business Review about leadership. What do you think Polish workforce and Polish workers and Polish colleagues at Polish companies that you know right now are facing the pandemic, what are they looking for? Are they looking for more adaptation or for more disruption? Anna, may I start with you?
Yes. I think that we all like, by the way, in society to have this sort of polarized, is it this or is it that? I think ultimately what people are looking for is people are looking for a great sense of security. People are looking for a great sense of connectivity to where they're working, right? And ultimately, yeah, if you can be part of something that's successful and moving forward, then yes, you want to be a part of that. This idea that disruption equals innovation is false, yeah? And there are the ability to move things forward. Now, absolutely, disruptive ideas have helped bring society forward. No question, yeah? But what people ultimately are looking for is they're looking to be valued. They're looking to be, they're looking to contribute. They're looking for safety and security. These times have given an incredible sense of uncertainty to all of us. We're all aware of that. All of us have probably spent a lot more time with friends and family and reflecting on how we've run our lives. I know personally, I sleep more because I'm not chasing the clock as much as I used to be. There are things that I'm doing that bring me back to a sense of value of what it is I do and how it is I do it. So, ultimately, I'm not sure that there's a polarization of we're looking for this or that. I think ultimately we want a bit of everything, but it's got to start with that sense of security. It's got to start with that sense of fit, and then it's ultimately how do we balance then our own ability to grow personally in all of that.
Can I?
Yes, sure, Beata.
Definitely, we have to distinguish between short-term and long-term strategic decisions. And of course, nowadays, we are talking about a certain circumstances, pandemic. Of course, this is out of the question that people need stability, safety. They want to be assured that the company, the leaders take care of their business environment, to stay healthy, to stay at work, not to lose job. So short term, and especially in this pandemic environment, you need stability. Disruption does not help. But if we are talking about long term, disruption or disruptive decisions, this is something to think about in a long term about the future. And of course, if you engage people who might participate in innovative solutions, innovative projects, then people are enthusiastically engaged. And look, even during the pandemic, look how many new tools were invented to help support our daily lives. All those tools that allow us to connect and have contacts with your families, with your loved ones. So this is something that was just the answer, even by disruptive decisions, because it had to be with new investments, it had to be with some innovative solutions, innovative decisions, but it was the answer to the expectation of the customer. So answering simply your question, yes, people need stability, but as to offer a fantastic, full of unknown and undefined space, working place or working space, this is something that you may attract good talents and people will stay with you because they believe they are part of the team creating the future. Short term, having the stability, so disruption. So the best is to have the opportunity for both. But of course, you need funds, you need resources to, on the one hand, to secure the working space, but at the same time to offer a very ambitious working environment.
And Anna, thank you very much for the additional questions that you had to handle unexpectedly. I now have the results of the vote. So may I recall that as we started our meeting and before the participants started to speak, the results were as follows. 58% of the audience was against the motion for disruptive leadership and 41% was in favor. 58 to 41, I'm skipping the percentile points. Now, after the debate, after we have heard from both teams, sentiment has shifted. And we are now at 47.5 against and 52.5 in favor of the motion for disruptive leadership. So in terms of pure efficiency in convincing, during the debate, the team arguing in favor of the motion was more efficient, and our audience has moved towards supporting a more disruptive leadership style. I'm having thoughts that this, might be an advance notice about the presidential election in Poland as we prepare for today's debate in the evening. I think this was a really interesting meeting today, an interesting exchange. I was really interested, and I listened closely to the arguments that you have presented. It is always interesting in Oxford debates to see how people actually very often defend the same positions, but from different angles, because the definitions are simply different. So I think probably each and every one of you, not only in the panel, but also among the leaders who are listening to us, is disruptive in some moments and adaptive in others. And very often it's a question of choosing the right attitude and the right tools to solve particular problems. As we drive to the close, I wanted to thank very much the participants, Beata, Stelmach, and Sławomir Sikora, who have spoken in favor, and Anna Jakubowski and Gregoire Nitot, who have spoken against the motion. You have done a great job. Thank you very much. Since we can't hear anybody else clapping, I will be clapping for you. Thank you. And I'm passing the audio on to our organizers, thanking them also for our support, and Alexandra Lichon for all the work she has done in order to connect us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.